In this video, we're going to be discussing the Chofetz Chaim, Rabbi Yisroel, Meir, Hakohen, Kagan. He was a very important rabbi in the 19th and 20th centuries. He was born in the year 1838, and he passed away at the age of 95 in the year 1933. He was born in Belarus, in what today's Belarus, part of the Russian Empire at the time, in a small shtetl called Zettel, and at the age of 10, after the passing of his father, his mother moved to Vilna so her son could get a proper Jewish education, and he learned in some of the very big yeshivas in Vilna, one of the centers of Torah study of that era. He did adopt his stepfather's name at some point, Popko, and later it seems that he changed it back to Kagan. So there's a little bit of a confusion about what his name was. It seems that he did go by Popko for some time and moved back to Kagan. So he has a son, for example, Rabbi Popko, who was his son, I guess because his son took his name when he was still going by the name Popko. At any rate, at some point he became the rabbi in the city of Radin in Poland, and that's where he gets his fame, comes from, as the city of Radin. He at some point resigned from his position as rabbi, and he decided to open a yeshiva. And there were different versions of the yeshiva. Eventually, it became known as Yeshivas Chofetz Chaim of Radin. And over there, he had a tremendous yeshiva, became very famous, and this is one of the areas of where he gained fame. He was also, at some point, he also became one of the older statesmen of Lithuanian Jewry, where he was one of the oldest. Again, he passed away at the age of 95. There's pictures of him in his 90s, where he was part of the Aguda conventions and visiting dignitaries and the like. He also had a tremendous passion about Moshiach, and he felt that we should study laws about Moshiach, and what things that will be relevant when Moshiach comes. This is eventually codified in his book called Tzipisi Yeshua, which means, did you await salvation, referring to Moshiach. He wrote a book about it. He also had a kollel kachim, he had a kollel where they would study the laws of sacrifices that would be in the temple, and he felt that this was important as a kohen specifically, that this was important that people should study these laws and be familiar with these laws. He also, it says that the Chofetz Chaim had a suitcase ready, packed for when Moshiach would come, ready to go to Israel, under his bed. At some point, he did, I believe in 1925, he wanted to move to the land of Israel, and he was convinced out of it at that point. His family, he wanted to go with his daughter and his family, and eventually he decided not to, because people realized that his leadership was needed in Europe, so he opted to stay. So let's get into the Chofetz Chaim's works and his philosophy. First of all, he was an extremely humble person, very, very not really interested in the limelight. You could see in the way he dressed. He wore a simple Russian hat, like a train conductor kind of hat. He wore, nothing fancy. Didn't have an entourage. Later in his life, when he was like all the pictures that you see of him surrounded by people, that's when he was visiting, dignitaries and stuff, and people would follow him. But like in the city of Radin, nobody really knew who he was. In fact, one of the famous pictures of the Chofetz Chaim that's on the in the 1980s, whatever, was on the picture of all his on the cover of all his books in English and etc. Apparently wasn't even a picture of him. It was just a random person who lived in Radin, and people were so unfamiliar with his picture that they didn't even know what he looked like. And many of the pictures that do exist are kind of him looking away. Right? He never really posed for pictures. He wasn't really interested in the limelight. But nonetheless, he understood his role, and he led the Jewish people, working together with Hasidic leaders, non-Hasidic leaders. The whole thing didn't really bother him of Jewish politics. He wanted to help Jewish people, and specifically the religious community, in furthering Judaism and religious study. He's very famous for his magnum opus, if you want to say, we'll see why maybe that's not 100% true, is called Chofetz Chaim. That's what he was known as. The Chofetz Chaim is a very fascinating book, because until then, there were many people who spoke about the laws, not the laws, they spoke about the idea of speaking Lashon Hara, of speaking evil speech. The Torah tells us we're not allowed to say something bad, even if it's true about somebody. However, all the works over the years were mostly just works of, philosophy and, why we shouldn't talk about it, how do we make sure we don't talk bad about other people, etc. No one ever got into the laws and the details of what are you allowed to say, what are you not allowed to say. Nobody ever written a book about it, and that was one of the accomplishments of his book Chofetz Chaim, which he becomes known as. That he actually writes a book of the laws. What are the halachas? Am I allowed to say something bad about somebody if it's going to affect a shidduch, if it's going to affect a marriage, if it's going to affect business, etc.? When am I allowed to say things? When am I not? And he actually goes into it. Eventually, he did write another book called Shmir's Haloshain, which means guarding one's tongue, which actually is more the philosophy and the you want to say the morality of not speaking bad about somebody. What's fascinating about it, even though he becomes known as the Chofetz Chaim and somebody who never spoke bad about somebody and wanted to really teach these halachas, teach these laws, the Lubavitcher Rebbe once spoke about it, that the Chofetz Chaim was known as a chatterbox. I don't know if the Rebbe himself met the Chofetz Chaim. I believe his father-in-law did, so he probably had first-hand knowledge. That he said he was somebody who's always talking. It wasn't like people think of somebody who's so careful about what they say, that there's some hermit living in a mountain. No, the Chofetz Chaim was a leader of the Jewish people, and he had to talk to people and know about them, and so he was not like some sort of hermit. He was a very sociable person, involved with people's lives and helping them. So, fascinating anecdote. Another one of his I would say his magnum opus would really be the Mishnah Berurah. The Mishnah Berurah is a commentary on the first section of Shulchan Aruch or Chaim, the basic daily laws that every Jew has to know. And he wrote a commentary and put together also basic halachas of things that are similar to what the Alter Rebbe had done in his Shulchan Aruch, of taking all the opinions of the previous generations and kind of making them again succinct. He did that in the Mishnah Berurah. However, it is a longer commentary. It's not as short, but it's very easy to understand. Anybody could learn it, and it's become extremely popular. And it kind of supplanted many of the previous kind of accepted codes of the Ashkenazi Jewish world, such as the Aruch HaShulchan, Kaf HaChaim, and others that had been, so to speak, like the more modern, codes, and he kind of became the most accepted code, and it became accepted even amongst Sephardic Jews to some point, amongst Hasidic Jews, because he did study very much the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch. It's very clear from his Piskei Dinim, from his laws, that his decisions, that he learned the Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch very much. And he eventually, and there are sections of the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch that are not extant. For example, the laws of Hanukkah, the laws of Purim, in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, like we mentioned in the previous video, that many of his things were burned. So it is not extant, those halachas, and therefore the common thing for even Hasidic Jews is to look in the Mishnah Berurah. He's the last more later person who again collected all the previous generations' laws and made decisions. So many even Hasidic Jews follow the Mishnah Berurah in many ways. In addition to the Mishnah Berurah, he also wrote a commentary called the Shari Tzion, which is kind of like little notes, and he also wrote Bir Halacha, which are kind of longer essays. It's all in the same book. So basically, you have on the middle of the page, you have, or the top of the page, you have the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah, the Rabbi Yosef Karo Shulchan Aruch with the glosses of the Ramah, and then on the bottom you have the Mishnah Berurah and the Bir Halacha and the Shari Tzion. So those are on the page. And again, probably something really important that was accepted across the Jewish people, accepted his books as decisive and final decisions of Jewish law across the spectrum of Hasidic, non-Hasidic, and even Sephardic Jews. In addition, he wrote many other books. He wrote books about specific laws. We mentioned already his Chofetz Chaim, Shmir Shalashin. He wrote books about Jews coming to America. He wrote books, over a dozen books. I can't name all of them here, but he wrote extensively, all about all about Jewish law, Jewish philosophy. I guess you could say small like booklets about different topics that he was very, kind of picked the topics. It wasn't just all encompassing. A lot of these books. The Chofetz Chaim's legacy lives on. There are many yeshivas today in America that were founded by his relatives, nephews, grandchildren, etc. Who's founded yeshivas known as Chofetz Chaim, etc. There's a big movement even today in America to people should speak nicely about each other, where they study the Chofetz Chaim's books about speech. There's also, like we said, his legacy is very important in halacha, in the Jewish law, where we follow his Piskei Din and we follow his decisions. When it comes across the board of Mishnah Berurah, and in fact, the Lubavitcher Rebbe spoke about that everyone should learn Mishnah Berurah, very important to learn, so we can know what to do. Simply know what to do in Jewish law. In addition, he was, like we said, he was known as a very humble person, and just a small anecdote, and maybe we'll finish with this. Is one time he had to testify in court, and he didn't want to swear. In Jewish law, it's frowned upon swearing. It's a very serious thing, and he didn't want to swear. So the judge, said, if you're going to testify, then you have to swear. So one of the lawyers said, "You know who this man is? This man is such a holy person, such a righteous person, that a thief came and stole his silver candlesticks. And before the thief could leave, the Chofetz Chaim got up and he said that he is making his candlesticks ownerless. So therefore, the thief will not be transgressing any laws technically because he'd taken something that was ownerless." And the judge turns to this lawyer and he says, "Do you really believe such story, that this really happened?" And he said, "Your Honor, they don't say these stories about me or you." So a very telling story about the Chofetz Chaim's piety. There are many stories about it, and he lived in a very important time in Jewish history where pivotal of when different movements, the isms, I guess you could say, the era of the isms, and he stuck true to Judaism and religious life, and really powered that on to the next generation. Thank you very much for listening. If you have any questions, comments, something I could have said, should have said, would have said, let us know. We love to hear feedback, and we'll see you in the next video. I think this is it for videos about we kind of started from the beginning of the evolution of Jewish law. We kind of got into the more modern era, and I think we'll stop here, and we're going to start a new series about, God willing, starting about the development of Kabbalah, of Jewish mysticism. So looking forward to seeing you in the next video.